Hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here teaching for you here at KringleCon, and we're going to be going into some PowerShell techniques that you can use to help look for sensitive files or files that contain interesting contents. So I got to say, when I got this invitation from Santa Claus, who could say no? And frankly, I'm really excited that we're having the opportunity to all work together and make Christmas and the holiday seasons that much more secure from the bad guys. So as part of that, attendees of KringleCon, I'm looking at you to figure out how to test the security of everything, whether it's the North Pole weather control systems to the Elves Workshop. You have to go out and make sure that the bad guys can't get a toehold. So what I want to talk with you is a little bit about a passion project of mine within PowerShell. Now, when I'm not here at KringleCon, which, by the way, was oddly difficult to get to. I mean, I know that it's a busy travel time, but holy cow, it was rough. One of the things that I like to do is teach for SANS, and I teach 504 and 555. I've got a whole bunch of upcoming events coming, so depending on which class you're interested in, feel free to join in on the fun. But one thing that I'm here to talk to you about is PowerShell. I've been playing around with PowerShell for years and years, and quite frankly, I love it. But I noticed that a lot of people aren't using it to its fullest potential. And so if you're struggling, if you're doing a penetration test, you need to start asking yourself some questions. You know, is there a task that's being too difficult? Or maybe it's too time consuming. Or what if the task is slow? A lot of times we're going to be getting volumes of data and you need better ways to sift through it, or it's just flat out boring. Or, you know, if you've done this task multiple times, it's time, friends, for you to look into PowerShell. That's right, PowerShell. It's the gift that keeps on giving because it's an API glue that allows you to see all kinds of interesting things that are going on with the systems in the environments that you're testing. Now, PowerShell was originally developed as a blue team tool, but there's plenty of use that the bad guys have leveraged out of it, and so you should be too. And one of the things that really a lot of people struggle with is showing the actual business impact of what's going on with once the bad guys get into the environment. Most times I see a penetration test, the reports are actually pretty bad. They say, oh, we were able to become administrator on this local system or domain administrator. And to that I say, so what? What you need to do is start showing business impact. And one of the things that you can do to show business impact is that you actually get your hands on interesting files, files that contain data. For instance, maybe the good boys and girls list that Santa keeps, or the naughty kids list. So I want to share with you a way that you can quickly find the files that you need across the enterprise. So one thing that you can look for is use the Windows Search Index. The Windows Search Index is amazing, and that's why we're putting the for the win here. It's something that not enough defenders think about. I have seen some forensics people playing with it a touch, but not as much as I would have liked, and I almost never see penetration testers use it, which is why I'm talking to you today about this. The most interesting thing from a penetration testing standpoint about the Windows Search Index is that it's enabled by default. This means that most, in fact, the ultra majority of systems are going to have the Windows Search Index up and running, and this has a really interesting effect because we can search by file contents, not just file names. And the other thing that you need to understand is that it's lightning fast. The search index is a database that contains the content that we need to search for, and that's it. So we no longer have to actually crawl through the file system a file at a time, which can cause high input output. That high I/O can be detected because a lot of times people now are looking for ransomware, and unfortunately, if you don't use this technique, when you're rifling through the file system or maybe a network share, you're going to look a lot like a ransomware or some other odd behavior. I've almost never, ever had anybody catch me using the technique that I'm about to show you, because this looks like a normal user interacting with the regular Windows search index, which you would normally interact with from your Windows File Explorer, but we're going to be doing it all from the command line within PowerShell. The way we're going to do this is by using a lesser known PowerShell commandlet called getIndexedItem. A little bit in the talk later, I'll give you a link that you can use to get this. But the thing that's so cool about this is this will make the queries for you, and it actually exposes some functions of the Windows Search Index API that you wouldn't even have available to you if you were using the Windows File Explorer. So I can't stress enough that you need to use this. And I stand by the second bullet point. It's very, very easy to use. We're now going to dive into a demo of how to use the getIndexedItem, and you'll be shocked at just how similar to other PowerShell scripts it is. Okay, we're now in on my normal teaching system, and you'll see here that I have the getIndexedItem.ps1. In order to load this, I have to either allow execution of PowerShell code, and right now my execution policy is restricted. So to bypass that, I'm just going to use the classic bypass mode. So PowerShell EP bypass, and now a new PowerShell prompt starts up, and if I get my execution restriction policies now, you'll see that I'm in bypass mode. Once I'm in bypass, now what I can do is import module, getIndexedItem. And once you've imported the module correctly, you won't see any sort of indicators that it loaded correctly or not. This is a case of where no news is good news. And so now to run this commandlet, all you simply do is getIndexedItem, like so, and then you specify your filter conditions, what you're looking for. And the filter notation is well documented inside the script, so once you download it, you'll learn all the filter syntax. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to show you a few very relatively simple use cases so that you can get up and running with that. So if I wanted to see any file that is listed that contains a specific string, I would do something along these lines. Now, let's say I'm looking for my files where my wife is mentioned. So now I have a query, and some of you may say this looks a little like SQL. That's a deliberate choice on the developer who created this script. And I find this to be very, very simple to interact with. Now, all I need to do is hit enter, and I just pull up all the files where she's inside. Her name is actually inside the file. And what's crazy is just how fast this is. So this machine I use for teaching SANS events, and when I run this command, you'll see that I have many, many files that have something to do with SANS. And believe it or not, the thing that's actually slowing things down is the rate at which the PowerShell prompt can display the text out. If I was writing to a file, it would actually be writing, we'd probably already be done now. So I'm just going to hit Control-C to end this. As you can see, you may get a whole lot of data out of this. So I want to hop back to my slide deck and explain some things about this. So the first thing that I would encourage you to use to make this a little more enjoyable and a little more fruitful for you is to use the -path option to restrict your search. So going back to this query that was problematic because it was so lengthy, if I add path and then I put C users McD downloads, you'll see that I get a much smaller set of files because I'm only restricting to one particular path. The next bit of advice I would give you is make use of the pipeline. PowerShell, really, the whole power of it is that it works somewhat like Unix, and frankly, I'm a longtime Unix admin, and this is what has drawn me to PowerShell, is the concept of pipeline. You should look into using things like select, select string, and where objects. These commandlets will dramatically improve the performance and targeting that you can get. So for instance, let's go back up to this command, and let's say I wanted to restrict my findings to only include things like PowerPoint objects or like PowerPoint documents. So what I would do is select name and then pipe it into select string. And then what I would do is have my pattern be pptx, because that's the extension for a PowerPoint deck. And here right away we can see these are the objects that we have within the downloads directory. So it's really, really easy and unbelievably fast. So what I would encourage you guys to do is go out there, start playing for it. Use this. Now, things to look for. I love to look for usernames. And one thing that I would encourage you to do is look for the raw string username or usernames, and also look for the strings of the actual usernames that you're able to enumerate from the machines that you're on. This will allow you to very quickly and easily find other usernames because oftentimes they're grouped, and it's a very powerful technique. Also, look for passwords. Look for the string password. Look for the actual raw string of the password that you've been able to steal or crack, because when you find one password, you're usually going to find others. Please start looking for API keys. Developers seem to have not yet gotten the message that if you steal the API key, you can take over the web application. So please find them before the bad guys do. Also look for configuration files. Once you have a configuration file, those usually point to other systems. And the thing that I love about this technique, using this to enumerate config files, I don't have to send packets downrange. It's a very economical way from a network standpoint to enumerate the environment, which is awesome because that makes it very hard for defenders to catch it. So use your config files to enumerate your environments. And finally, look for interesting terms for your client. You know, because we're here at KringleCon, start looking for the naughty boys and girls list. Start looking for things like who's getting lumps of coal. So you'll be able to find interesting terms for your client based off of the reconnaissance that you've been doing. So try it out yourself. I've made a tiny URL for you to go ahead and download and get this very helpful script. What I would encourage you to do is take it, play with it, and see how you like it. I'm sure you will, though. And the version that I've linked to here is from the Empire project. Some of you may have known it as PowerShell Empire. It has since grown to include some Python modules, so it's now simply called the Empire project. This is the version that came from a TechNet article and a series of blog postings that were made years ago. And it's really cool that this is getting folded into this project. Unfortunately, I don't know many people who are using it. So please play with this component. I'm sure you'll dig it. Also, I would encourage you to read the code. I know that that sounds rather elitist, but there's many features and functions that this script has that we simply don't have time to go over in our limited time together. What I've shown you is a lot to get you started, but believe me, this goes way deeper than what I have time. And then also test in non-production. Even though this is lightning fast, I have seen EDR that could catch this. If you're trying to fly below the radar, there's some evasion techniques that you're going to need to use. So test it in your non-production environment that replicates prod as closely as possible. And then finally, test your UNCs. I would really consider that required usage of -path when you're doing network analysis. And the reason why is when you're doing network shares or doing this sort of discovery on a network is that you're going to find volumes of data, just way too much. So by restricting things down with path, you're going to have a much better time. So that kind of ends our time together. I hope that you have a whole lot of luck securing the North Pole. We're all counting on it because, quite frankly, a world without Christmas is quite scary. So go out, do good, and find the bad guys and find the insecure data before they do. I want to thank you for your time, and feel free to reach out to me at BetterSafetyNet on Twitter. Thanks so much, KringleCon. Happy New Year.